one of the things I want to do is to allow people to pop in with a question every now and again. I love a bit of a challenge. Don't worry, there's not 21 slides there. There's a few less. It's probably about 211 actually. But anyway, I don't want to bore you. The slideshows are made to keep me on track and also to help you have something afterwards. Okay, right, the customer experience journey. First of all, I just wanted to, I think that's the one. Yeah, I just wanted you to see what I look like. This is me doing a presentation down in West Wales in Carmarthen some years ago, actually. I haven't changed. I've still got the grey hair and actually I still got that shirt as well. So just occurred to me. But this is what I look like anyway. So let's progress. And if you want to find out more about me, just pop along to my LinkedIn profile. If you like what you see, just feel free to connect. But mention in the notes that you send me that you saw me speak on this presentation. Okay, right. User experience and customer experience. One of the things I've been doing for years is user experience, and it occurred to me that actually user experience is different from customer experience, and that user experience deals with the individual steps in a customer's journey, so that it's more of a design attribute rather than dealing with the emotional travel and the mechanical steps that people make in their journey from where they start to buying and advocating your business. But the customer experience deals with every step, and it should be a whole journey. You should be looking at this as a whole journey rather than just individual steps. You know, one of the things that user experience is that it was Amazon who had the problem. Is that, can anybody hear a dog barking?
Yeah, the dog's a little bit clearer than you are at the minute, Nigel.
I'm sorry. The dog's now. I've shut the door so I can't hear the neighbour's dog. Right. Right, Amazon, that's right. Amazon, many years ago, about 10 years ago, had a bit of an issue with people who were going onto the site, finding a book that they wanted, because at the time they were selling books and CDs, I think, and cassettes. And what they found was that people were dropping out on the purchase side, because the way they had their purchase was you had to press on a button to register as an account holder before you could actually purchase. And so they did some research with their customers and said, well, why is it that you don't want to buy? And their customers were saying, we don't want to form a relationship with the company. We just want to buy a book. So they changed. What they found was the information they required to register was all the information that people would put in to have a book sent to them. So they had that information. And so what they did is they just say, go to purchase or buy now. That the button changed from register now to buy now. And then at the end of the process, when someone had purchased a book, they asked them if they would like to set up an account so to make it easier to make a purchase in the future. And the difference that made in the first year after that, they changed that from register now to buy now, they had an uptake of an extra $300 million worth of business. Now, that's just changing one word. And it's simple how a little bit of thought about the customer experience in that particular, or the user experience in that particular step of the journey made a difference to their turnover. Okay, so just establish two things there. And I will now go on to a black screen. Oh, this is what it is. Wouldn't it be easy if customers just turned up and bought lots of your stuff? If you want to put the microphones back on and say, everyone say yes, that would be brilliant for me so I can hear some feedback.
Yes.
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 Good. Oh, great. I'm glad I got some feedback.
We're all
I'm talking to myself.
We're all alive.
Yeah, that's great. So, you know, that would be brilliant. But then that's just order taking. And this is what's happened over the years is everyone's become order takers. And as the internet market has grown, as people have grown in those the number of competitors has increased and everything else. And you can also go to Amazon to buy, or you can go to an individual website to buy the same product and everything else. The competition is like the high street used to be, where there's lots of little companies, shops selling the same similar things, and they were competing on price, they were competing on all these other things. So what people started realizing now is that you can't do that anymore, because you've got to go and fight for your customers. So selling has become much more important, but how do you engage those customers? How do you help those customers come to your shop, not go to competitors? Okay, and I've read so many books and articles and watch videos on YouTube and everything else, and been to seminars, presentations. Everyone deals with the customer once they've arrived at the shop. Once they've come into the shop in your website, or they've come into your brick and mortar shop, that's when they speak to the customer. They never think about why the customer turned in there. What was the customer thinking about that made them come in to buy it? Did they know about it beforehand? One of the sad things is, if you think about it, a lot of people don't even know your company exists. There's more people who don't know it exists and the products you provide exist than actually know who you are, where you are, and what you sell. And it's a realization that you should take on board straight away. In the your first steps then to sort of work all this out is basically choose a product or service, because you can't do all the products together. You've got to think about each product as an individual thing. So it's a laborious process, but it's worth doing. And we found benefits to our clients over the years has been, it's been phenomenal, the increase in turnover and the increase in customers coming to look for their things. Okay, determine what you want to achieve. Okay, at the end of the day, what are you trying to achieve? Trying to grow your services, trying to grow your product sales. And again, you've got to think about how many customers can you deal with? How is your company scalable? Okay, one of the issues that a lot of people have is that they can provide, say, 10 services a month, but if you push them to 11, it reduces their ability to have a weekend off, or even go on to their wedding anniversary and stuff. And this is some of the issues that you have to consider, because a lot of people are chasing after thousands of customers when actually they can only deal with a few at a time. In other places, if you've got a scalable business, then yes, you are going after a much larger marketplace, and so your understanding of your customers needs to be more considered. But you're chasing after a larger number because your business is able to increase its supply. Okay, so identify current customers who purchase that product. Okay, so go on. Please interrupt if you've got a question. I don't mind those.
Natalie's just joined us, so just say hello quickly to Natalie. I would say, Nigel, I'm not 100% sure if it's your signal or you're using a microphone or hands-free, but there's quite a bit of interference on your audio. We're managing, we're okay. I think we're following the gist of it, but I don't know if there's anything you can do about that.
I switched all the software off and you got the slideshow running on Zoom. Right. So identify current customers. And again, ask yourself, who is your ideal customer? And if you're in the services industry, think about who your ideal customers are. It's often, well, you'll see as I develop this actual, as I go through this small slideshow. Okay, think about your customers, think about who your ideal customers are, and also, as I say in the last piece there, is develop a persona. Now, I don't know how many of you do personas. Can I have a sort of, some indication from you of how many personas that you've done for your customers?
How many have
done any
personas? Yeah, so we do them as a matter of course in our business.
Yeah.
But does everybody want to raise a hand? Can we raise our hands if we've used personas in our business?
Yeah.
Oh, hold on.
I meant on screen, but it's lovely to see everybody waving so enthusiastically. There's at least 2 people, Nigel, who use personas.
That's great. Thanks for the feedback, Tony. How deep do you go in your personas?
So this is
it just in?
Yeah.
Because some of the personas I've seen, and I was dealing with a large government organization just before Christmas, and they'd done personas, they barely covered a piece of A4, and it was all just key phrases for that particular person, but they didn't actually dig down and ask questions. What's the backstory? Why are they engaged in this particular industry? Why are they what were they feeling at the time? What technology do they actually use? Now, some of the things, I made this thing last for about 3 hours if you wanted to, because I'm only just going to skim across the surface and cover the top level of it. But I could go on and spend a day on personas, because it is such an important aspect. A lot of people say personas aren't that good, but they actually help everyone in the team, especially if there's more than one of you. It helps everyone in the team to understand who the customers they're chasing after are. And it puts everyone on the same level, so they understand who the customer is, what technology they use, what access do they have to digital. Because surprisingly enough, and this is a quick question, if you could switch the mics on, Tony, what is the percentage of people in the UK who don't have a smartphone?
30%.
Oh no, like 3%, surely.
90%. My parents.
I'd say 10%.
10%. There you go.
It's just about 22%.
Oh.
They don't have a smartphone. Some of them have phones, mobile phones, but they're sort of text and talk. So they can't access the internet. They can't do all the other things that people do. They don't have apps. And this is one of the things I was thinking about when they announced the possibility. The government said that they were doing this app, that track and trace app. What about all the people who don't have access to that? And also, what about the people who live in areas where there isn't a very good signal? Because there's still a lot of those areas around in the UK. It's funny how everyone thinks that everyone's got the technology, and it's interesting to say that there's about 3% who don't have smartphones. It's a lot more people than that, and everyone says, "Oh, it's the old people." Well, actually, no, it's not. There's a lot of young people who've rejected technology. So these outliers, you have to think about them when you're, especially if they form a core to your business. And again, you love to switch the phone off and never take it out.
Sorry, Nigel.
Sorry.
Worth mentioning input there from Natalie, who's the Chief Marketing Officer. Let's just get that clear. She clearly knows what she's talking about. And she's saying, she's making a brilliant point here. Personas need interviewing and in-depth analysis. I often find businesses try to come up with the personas of their customers themselves.
Yes.
And they don't actually realize that the way to find out who the persona is, the different people, different types who shop with you or do business with you, is to talk to them themselves.
You have group thinking organisations as well, don't you? Everyone shoots out and they just reinforce that same view.
Yeah, it's the way it always was. So accepted wisdom is 100%. But Natalie's also posed a really interesting question here. When you're targeting everybody, when do you not need a persona? Natalie, have I phrased that correctly? Is that what you meant to say?
Yeah, so I mean, two things on personas. I love them. I worked with Bill's department store, and they were very customer centric, and they redid their personas every 3 months, and they used to put them all over the back end, all in the staff rooms and everywhere, so that no matter who you were in business, you always at the back of your mind had this picture of who Susan was or who John was, and how they thought, how they shopped, what they wore, why they were there, all that kind of. It was brilliant. So I think, without a persona, you can't be a customer first business. But I have an interesting question that I'd love to know what people think. What do you do when you have when everybody's your target audience? So I'm in a situation at the moment where I'm working on a product and anybody could buy it and everybody should buy it. And I've started working on personas, and I mean, it's just everybody. And I'm like, well, is it still relevant now? Or am I general? I don't really know the answer. I don't want to generalize in the communications I'm developing. It does fit everybody, or do I need to have, like, I don't know. I don't know the answer.
It's fascinating because, sorry, Chris, from Peter will know what I'm talking about here, but from the dim and distant past, as a marketer, salesperson, advertising salesperson, the first question we ask our clients is, who are you talking to? And almost every single time the answer is everyone.
Yep.
Because everybody can buy my product and everybody will benefit from it, as you just said. And we would go through grit deal of trouble to convince in the first place the client that they didn't need to talk to everyone. In fact, what we want to do is talk to people who are most likely to buy, whatever that means. And I also think, and I'm sure Nigel will touch on this, it depends on the comms and when they're going to occur with the client as well, in terms of when in the funnel. So, you know, if you're ever going to talk to everybody, it's when you're at the awareness phase and you're trying to convince people that you have a solution to a problem that maybe they haven't already realized they've got, you know.
Well, the timing's bad.
Say again, Chris.
Just because you say you've got a solution for them, they may not be ready for that solution at that moment in time.
Yes, exactly.
You know, it's very rare that you have that solution and they want it exactly the same time. I think I just want to respond to Natalie.
Yeah, please do.
Data protection, because everyone, the law says we should all be taking care of data protection. The reality is, in the personas, whether you're a retailer, whether you're a sports organization, whether you're finance, it doesn't, whether you're small, medium, large, it does not matter. But when you look at the personas, we start looking at whether they're a regulated industry or not a regulated industry, because that will mean they are further up the time curve than someone else. And it just got really detailed that, yes, everyone still does, but I think I'm reinforcing Tony's point. It's a question of when, what will be the driver that will make them engage? And that meant some are on a too difficult par right now and they'll come to us later on, or someone else. And others are the early adopters and some are the second phase adopters.
You've all helped me. Thank you so much.
Can I add one thing in on that?
You can't see it. Thank you. Yes.
Yeah. Did you notice that conversation then was actually developing a persona of a particular type of person? Now, Tesco, how many, just imagine how many customers Tesco has in pre-lockdown days. Okay, the millions of people in the UK who go into Tesco to do their shopping each day or once a week or whatever their routine is. How many personas do you think Tesco have of all those customers?
One.
A million.
A bit more.
23.
They've actually, it's 18.
18. Oh, that's not bad, yeah.
18, but they are thick documents. Okay, and everyone who comes to work in the marketing department, so they read these. I've been dying to get hold of one just to see how they lay it out, but they review those regularly. Okay, and they're lucky because they have loyalty cards and they have all the online stuff that helps them to get that data in. Because they're a big company, they have a massive amount of data to draw through. And this is the interesting thing, because I don't know if most of you know this, but you will know now. I'm in the middle of writing a book about customer journey mapping and customer experience journey mapping. And one of the things one of the chapters is called Big Data, AI, and DIY. And a lot of companies, smaller companies, can do this themselves as long as they've got a nice little team of people and they can access a couple of their customers to do these persona developments. They can create these personas of their ideal customer. Okay, and one of the ones I always say add on at the end is Dick. Dick doesn't want your product. He doesn't see a need for it, but you've got to understand Dick so that you know who to avoid, so then you can actually focus down on the ones who want to buy. And as you said, Tony, and Chris, it's about the time the timing might be wrong, or they don't realize they need this at the moment. And it's about how you use your communications at the different stages in their journey to help them to engage with your business rather than the competitor, because they like you rather than someone else. Okay, so I've just been looking at
Sorry, I know. Yeah, I just want to. Sorry, Nigel. I know the time is pushing on, but I just one more thing for Natalie's benefit. So, Natalie, in the radio world, in media world, we talk about demographic shoulders. I don't know if anybody's come across this idea, but if you have a target demographic, and that really looks like a spike on the chart. But if you pick the right target in radio land, you'll get wider shoulders than you would for another target. So, for instance, our very specific target was a female who was 35, married, and with 2 children, because that demographic actually has really broad shoulders. Because the things we were targeting at our 35-year-old female with 2 children appeal to other people. So, for instance, male-orientated music doesn't usually appeal to women. On the other hand, female-orientated music generally does appeal to men. And if you're in your 30s, you tend to be a little bit clinging onto your youth. So if you're in your 20s, you might want to aspire to be a little bit older. If you're up where I am, you certainly think that you're 30. So all these factors then broaden the shoulder. But the interesting thing was, the more narrowly tightened, the more narrowly focused that peak is, the better the shoulders became. So you're almost achieving the opposite to what you would think. By appealing to more and more and more and more people, you're actually dropping the peak, and you're dropping therefore your overall reach. By really tightening it, you're heightening your peak and you're broadening the shoulders, which means you ultimately get more people out of it.
When I do mine, Tony, I actually pick a customer, an individual customer who I think best exemplifies that demographic, and that customer becomes that actual real person becomes the persona.
Exactly.
And so I'm going to do everything for that one individual person, on the basis that will then appeal to everyone who's similar to them. But by making it an actual person that I know, for me, it makes it much more tangible rather than sort of thinking of an abstract concept.
There is a difference between the segment and the persona in there, and I think that's why a lot of people also get tripped up, is that they tend to focus on the segment rather than on, persona. The clue is in the question. It's a person. So we had pen portraits of John and Sarah. They were our listeners. John was the male version, Sarah was the female version, and we had an entire story about John and about Sarah, what they did, where they lived, how many kids they had, where they went shopping. As Nigel has said, it was, and all our presenters had to commit this to memory, because that was the person that they were talking to. They were talking to John and they were talking to Sarah.
Yeah. And I think this is important as well, because you're talking about those are the people you're talking to. You can craft your content, everything you do. This is what the persona does. It helps to inform you of how you craft everything else. You can craft the design of your presentation. You can craft the focus of it on that person. And if you think about it, for those of you of my age and perhaps over 25, when you received a present from a great aunt or someone, you always wrote a little note to say thank you, dear Auntie Ethel, whatever it is. When you wrote to the bank manager, you wrote it in a totally different way. And it's the same when you write to your content and everything else. Think about the person it's being written to. And I don't want to think I'm telling you to suck eggs here, because sometimes people forget, and they just put this generalized content out to try and capture as many people as you can. As you said, Tony, it's about broadening the shoulders. If you can focus in on that particular person, the male and the female, then you've got two personas, and those are the people you're talking to. Anybody else who comes in is a bonus, but you're keeping them happy, that customer happy, and their expectations and their experience becomes better because they feel they're being talked to directly. Okay, let's press on. Your process map. This is about your process map in your business, and it's basically all you do is just write down a step-by-step process of how you deal with a customer when they come into the company. Okay, so that you understand your own processes. You'd be surprised the number of companies I've come across who don't really understand their own processes, and it's not about the buying; it's also all the connections. There's a thing called FMEA, and if you're engineering, you'll understand that one. It's failure mode effect analysis. And when you run a production line, you look at every single part of that process and identify what happens if we don't get the supply of the just-in-time components that go in on that stage of the production. What happens? Do we need to keep a buffer stock in? Okay, and the whole purpose of just-in-time is to avoid buffer stocks, to keep your overheads down. But I think in the last sort of 70 days, people have realized they wish they had kept a buffer stock.
Gone over on his
because
head,
the next, this is one of the things, because no one had down on their FMEA charts global pandemic, and as a result, they really I don't want to spend the next 15 minutes talking about their problems, but it's about really understanding your idea of your business and knowing what the steps are through the process, and how does the customer go through that process. Okay, so it becomes a framework for your customer's journey once they come into the business. And this is one of the important things, is everyone starts when a customer comes into the shop, and they should actually start probably 3 or 4 steps before then. Okay, and this is what I said in developing your ideal customer. Okay, identify your current customers who have purchased the product or used the service in the past, and speak to them. Do that into, just as, I'm sorry I didn't catch the person's name, just as that who said earlier. It's about talking to them. It's about talking to the customer that you identify as being, oh, there's my Bob. Okay.
Yeah,
so
that
you
was
move
Natalie.
Natalie. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and as you said, Tony, with one of your, or I think it was Natalie as well, they refresh that, or they add to it every 3 months. Okay,
That's fantastic.
So keep those up to date. They're living document.
Yeah, that's good.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, so it's choosing your products and services you provide, okay? And don't try and do all the products and services at the same time, because you've got different customers buying different things for different reasons, okay? And I'm going to wait until I got a slide coming up further down about it. Okay, determine what you want to achieve. What do you want to achieve? Do you want to grow it? Do you want to expand into new markets? All these other things you have to consider, because that, and just, I've done this. What am I doing? All right, the customer journey. There we are. Mapping and the customer journey. Okay, one of the things that we is thinking about where you start. It's about knowing your customers. So the types of customers you've got. Think about the knowledge of your customers. Okay, and if you're going after customers who don't know you exist, they don't know the services you provide, think about the knowledge of those customers and try and remember what it was like not to know. It's a really hard thing to do, because you know your processes, you know your business, you know what you sell, you know what you how everything's going on in the business, because you're aware of it. But think about someone who doesn't know. Do they understand the jargon? Do they understand all these other things? And these are all improvements you could be making by talking in their language. And this is where the personas come in, and that's really important for them. You know, all right. Though, and then think about those people who know what product is and want it. They're their first target, because they know what the product is. So getting those on board is quite easy, and they come into they join the customer journey at a much closer stage purchase. There's the people who know what the product is but don't know they want it. Okay, they didn't realize they needed this product. Okay, and then there's the ones who want the product but don't know what it's called. Has anyone ever been in that situation where you wanted something, you've done searches, and you can't find what you're looking for? No, I'll give you an example of that. Anyone know what those, those plastic things that hold labels on pieces of clothing?
Like where they got little ends on them, very thin.
Yeah, flat pieces on the end, and little things, and it's sort of stuck through. You know, the ones you cut them off and it's in your neck because you didn't take off the shirt or the polo shirt or something. Those. My wife was doing some artwork, and she wanted one of these machines for doing it. And she looked up, and she looked everywhere. She just didn't know what it was called. And it's quite simple. It's called a tagging gun.
Yeah, okay.
But she didn't know that.
Yeah.
And she's not stupid. She's quite a bright indivital. But eventually she found out what it was called. Once she found out what it was called, they're everywhere on the internet. Okay, but it is about that. Those people who don't know at all. So what words would they use to find it? What key pieces would they use? No one ever thinks about those. Now, sorry.
To build on that, one of them is, well, what do people call it in a different language?
Yeah. Oh, when you go international, it's a completely different ball game. I spent years talking to the languages industry. I've worked with quite a few of the translation companies across the UK and in Europe, and it's paid some very nice searches as well. Working with languages companies, translation companies, because they needed to understand how to do transcreation, they call it. So it's about recreating the same content, but in the language of the destination country and culture. Okay, and it's a huge industry that's still only been scratched on the surface of. Okay, and then finally you've got people who do not know product exists and do not know they need it. And I think Natalie said something about those people earlier. But the thing is, there's a lot more work going to be needed on that. There's an education process to go through. Okay, and then finally, you've got the last one is know that the product exists, but they don't want it. There are people out there who don't want to buy your product. Can you bear with me just 2 seconds? My assistant's brought me another lovely cup of coffee.
No.
Yeah, lucky me. Right, so think of all these different types of customers and their own knowledge. Okay. From ignorance to advocate. Okay, and this is the journey as far as the customer is concerned. If you go back to the point and start with the very first customer that knows nothing about you, nothing about the product or service, don't even know they need it or anything else. So what is their process? And if you look, 1, 2, 3, 4, fourth one down is purchase and receive. Okay, but before that, you've got ignorance. And I've been trying to find a nicer word than saying ignorance, but actually it is the right word for the subject because they are not aware of it. It's a lack of awareness.
Nigel, unawareness is.
I know. It's an uncomfortable word, but yeah, I'll probably change that in the future. Anyway, the first part is ignorance. Then you've got the discovery and the interest, and then there's the research. Their research. Okay, and then there's they find you, they've got your stuff because they like what they see there because you understand them and you've delivered the stuff that they're looking for, the information they require. And then there's the purchase and the receive. Okay, so they buy it, they receive it, they implement it because they could have been buying something that they have to screw together when you get it to the house. Okay, like some garden furniture or something. And then you go on to review it. They review it after they've had it and they've used it a bit. They review themselves, even if it's just a conversation between two people in the same household with family. But then they might take that further on and they might repurchase. And this is the last step, is repurchase. Or they may recommend it because one is all they ever want, and they'll refer to other people. Now we'll go through those steps one at a time. Ignorance. What's their emotional state? Are they happy or stressed? Now this is the all depends thing. Because when you think about it, if someone's going to look for debt advice, it means they've probably got debt issues. They're looking it up because they need to resolve them. They're highly stressed and emotional about it because they feel they've failed. And all these emotions are going to see somebody on the end of the line when they actually get through to someone, even if it's a message or something else, or if they get onto a website that talks in language that is way above their head, legalese and all that sort of thing. It's even further the process. Whereas if it's something that's a lot more harmonious with the way they feel and they're not being judged on that, then their whole experience is much better. They're still going to go to stress points, but they will get better. And it's when Natalie said earlier about talking to their customers to work at the personas, this is where you get a couple of your people who've actually bought into your services to come in and tell you about their emotional feelings as they went through the journey. Okay, and it's something that no one considers, because when someone is stressed, their ability to absorb information is much more reduced. In medical websites, without putting lots of legal Latin words for different conditions and stuff and not use the common terms, okay, people become far more stressed. Okay, so what could be just a minor little ailment turns out to be something terrible in their own minds, because that's the way they're thinking. This is something that's so important that I think a lot of marketeers don't even consider. Okay, again, is the product like they're buying a BMW, makes them feel aspirational. Okay, so their attitudes are going to be different, and they're buying a BMW because it's something they've aspired for a long time. It's an emergency. If it's an emergency, you've got to be very clear with your information. You've got to be very clear with your communications, but you've got to understand that they're in an emergency to do it, and they need to get to the result, the answer, very, very quickly. Always an impulse buy. It makes them feel good about themselves. Okay? From the company's point of view, it's about understanding the emotional state of the customer relative to your product, okay, and what will remove the pain or make them happy. Because if they're happy, they're much better engaged. Now, I don't know if you know this, but an experiment was done where they were interviewing a lot of potential employees for a large company, and at the bottom, they were met at reception downstairs. They went up in a lift, and while they were going up in the lift, they handed the girl who took them upstairs, she had a pile of papers in one hand and a coffee. And then she'd ask that she'd purposely drop a few sheets of paper on the floor in the lift and hand them the coffee and say, "Oh, could you hold this for me for a moment?" And when people were holding a warm mug of coffee, okay, they felt much nicer towards the to the girl in the room, in the lift chat, because they asked them the question after the interview for the job. They asked them, "What did you think of the person who brought you up?" Because we're thinking she's on probation at the moment, and we're wondering whether to employ her or not. The ones who she handed a hot cup of coffee to were all much nicer about her. Okay, now I know how you do this in the digital world is much more difficult, but can you see that it's understanding the emotional feelings? You can manipulate those by doing little things like watch Big Bang Theory. Whenever someone's stressed in that program or upset, the first thing that Sheldon does is ask them, "Would you like a warm beverage?" Okay, and I know it's quite a strange little thing, but I love that program. It's great.
It's a great show on telly. I watch it every night. Brilliant.
I know it's brilliant. I can't say this because it's going to be put out online, so I'll tell you afterwards, Tony. Anyway, discovery and interest. It's the customer at this point is what touch point they hit that leads them onto the content. And what is their emotional reaction to it? Is it, "Oh, you'd never guess what do you know what I found online? I found just what we're looking for." Okay. And I'll give you an example. We were looking for some sort of tray to use as a shower tray when we go camping, so we wouldn't have to use the facilities at the campsite. So we were looking around for something suitable. We ended up finding this sort of 25-litre trug in bright blue. My wife found it. "Oh, we got to have that." So that was it. It arrived a couple of days ago, and so we were practicing with that at the moment. But we were so excited about finding it because it solved the problem for us. Okay, as a simple example, from a company's point of view, it's creating those touch points, and they're not the website; they're off website. They're out there. It's like when you post an article out on LinkedIn or in a journal that is used by your customers, the ones you're chasing, because they get information from it, and that's where you invest in paid advertising, or you invest in article writing or polls or something of that nature. Okay, it's about your content getting out there with the right message for the people you're targeting based on what you've learned from the persona development. Okay, make the engagement direct. So in other words, when you send a tweet out, I've seen this so often with so many companies, they never put a link to go anywhere. They say it's really interesting. I want to know about that. They don't put a link in. They put hashtag wonderful day, but they don't put a link to go to the article. Or if they do, it's sometimes the link goes to the first page of the website. So people have to then hunt through the website to find the piece of information they were looking for. Create sense, like a scent, like a dog chasing after something. Pick up the scent and they follow it. And that's what you've got to do with customers. Let them pick up the scent somewhere and then follow it back to the website where they find what they're looking for. And keep them short as well, 3 or 4 clicks maximum. 1 is the best. Okay, so these help people discover and get in and create the interest that they will move on to make a purchase. Funny. Right. Okay, research. That's the customer doing the research now. So the customer will look at the website, they look at reviews or recommendations, they'll talk to families and friends, they read articles, they look at trade, possibly. Again, it all depends on what product it is, the services and people are looking for. They may even attend events. Okay, from the company, it's about, as I said in the last section, is publish content to reflect the diversity of media channels used. Okay, so whatever the customers are using, you have to as well. You can choose not to, because if you choose not to, it just restricts the number of people you're getting out to. And again, it all depends on how many customers you want. Okay, I'm going to push on for these. Purchase and receive. So they make a purchase, they receive the product, they open the boxes. What's their emotional feeling then? Okay, you know, been pointed out in one of the adverts recently with Apple and the new iPhone. And have you noticed where they open the box, they just hold the lid and it drops down? It takes something like 3.8 seconds for the box to actually open. Okay, it doesn't sound like long, but it's been in there for quite a while because it's part of the user experience, it's part of the customer's experience on the purchase, and the sound of the plastic when they take the plastic off the screen for the first time. And it's like a thrill for them. Okay, their emotions are going haywire. Now they've had the excitement of actually making the purchase. Okay, they received the product in the post, and now they're going through another boost to that happiness, endorphin, and emotion of when they open the actual box. And this is what Apple have done: is they've created this customer journey with all the exciting things that happen through it. And I'm not an Apple subscriber, but I know that from the people I've spoken to who have Apple products, these are all the exciting things that they get. So think about the for dispatch. Okay, your own or third party. If it's third party, you have to make sure that they are delivering the same customer experience that you would deliver if you were delivering it yourself. I'll give an example of that. In London, there's a company that delivers high-end goods to people same day. If they order it in the morning, it'll be delivered by the afternoon. But when it's delivered, I think it's a flower company it is, when they deliver the flowers, the bunch of flowers to the individual, they always send some jobbing actor or model, okay, to deliver the flowers. And they're all smartly dressed, okay, to deliver the flowers. And the thrill is not just receiving the flowers, but there's a good looking person delivering it. Now, it might sound sexist and stuff, but that's what the people receiving them get a thrill from. Okay. What can be to ensure the experience for the customer? No, one of the biggest faults for a lot of customers is the failure to deliver. Okay, so because the customer's out at the time. So can the product be fitted into a box that'll fit through the letterbox? Because then you know it's been delivered. Okay, and I've seen a couple of companies. There's one called the Letterbox Flower Company, Flowers again, and they put all the flower into a box. Actually, it's a long box. It'll slide through the letterbox, so they know they'll deliver it. So they don't have failure. So then it removes cost for them, but it improves the experience for the customer because they get it very, very quickly in an unusually shaped box. Okay. Implement and use. As I said a bit earlier, if it's an assembly, we've got to stick together, then it's all into something, then there's time invested. Does anyone want to ask any questions at this point?
There's a bit of a side chat going on, actually, Nigel. In the comments, it's quite people are picking up on things that you're saying and then expanding. Just maybe nice to refresh on some of those quickly.
I've only got 2 more points to make on this side, and then I'll.
Well, if you want to do that, and then maybe I can refer to the chat.
And, you can pull out those things. Thanks, Tony. Okay, so the customer installs, assembles, or sets up, and then they use it, and so they're still having an experience product, which is related to the company. So how can the company make sure that it's a good experience? Are the instructions for the assembly good? Are the instructions for the installation good? It's doing, but you only have to produce it once, because then you did it many times and then apply it with. The instructions have to be good and easy to use. Okay, don't just translate it from the Chinese into English. Okay, and get a Chinese person to do it. It's just the sense. Use somebody from the UK who actually understands what's going on so that they can do it. And when they use it, are they thinking of the company? So do you get to put your logo on things? And how can you remind them that you are the company that supplied it and made them happy from putting it in? Okay. And then there's the appraisal. So a customer will judge the product and the company based on the feeling and the trust they have with that company from the product they purchased. Now, if it's elevated them, it's made them feel good. If it's cleared a pain point, then they're going to love the company as much as because they've had no problems with what they're trying to do. But it's still up to the company to continue to make sure that it's good. It's a good experience. It continues to deliver for them after they finished working with the company. And again, this is the point, not long after they've received it, is where you should be chasing feedback. And I often find that with companies I've worked with, that if they send out a couple of days after someone's received something, a nice email saying part of our quality assurance, we strive. We are always trying to look for ways of improving our services, and we always ask our customers if they give a few minutes to do this, and we give you a 10% discount on your next purchase, or £1 off, or some other incentive. It helps people to actually complete the forms. Actually, the best thing, give them in, talk to them, because it's much more personal then. And then there's repurchase and recommend. If they're elated or are they upset? So again, encourage feedback, reward, understand the emotion people are going through. Okay. Now, if you're selling coffee, it's a different thing. You need to be a bit more diplomatic. I'm sorry, this is just my sense of humor coming through. But there are nasty things that could be made nice just because you engage them much better, or those companies engage with their customers in a different sort of way. So you have to know about the emotions. Okay, personas, I did about that earlier. Image, profile, educational level. This is just a little bit of aid memoir for you. Touch points, we talked about that. These are some of the things to think about for touch points, and things to think about. Your team. Who is your team? Okay, the team should be everybody working in the business, because everybody helps to improve customer experience. And if you've got a large team, and this is one of the things I had with this very big public sector organization before Christmas, they didn't even consider talking to the people at the front line on the desk to find out what people were saying about the company. And it's funny how somebody in one department, or a customer approaching someone in one department, can get an impression of the whole organization just by that experience. And if that person hasn't been made aware of everything, it brands the whole company the same way. Okay, and we know that, yeah, some people have bad days, but they've got to overcome that to maintain this thing for the whole company. Okay, customer research, get the customers involved, but beware of biases. There are a whole raft of different biases people have, and everyone thinks of their own bias when they're writing the questionnaire and stuff, but they don't think about the biases and the people who are actually filling them in. Okay, so I could spend a day talking just about biases. We talked about the personas, touch points, the map itself, and your website. How does this all relate to your website? Okay, well, there we are. Questions?
If I skip back a few comments, then
yeah.
So Chris Roberts started this part of the chat off. He asked if you have a template for capturing personas, for working on personas, and actually that led to a decent conversation about different ways you can do that. We talked about the various, I would say, the journey maps that are available as well. So everything from the so-called inbound, attract, convert, delight, to AIDA, awareness, education, conversion. Jody threw up. We've got, I think it's the Dagmar model that says something like unawareness, awareness, consideration, conviction, and then action. So a few of those popped up. Ian specifically picked up, and I think this was vital. You touched on this, and maybe we could have spent even more time on this, but removing that pain and making them happy. That's the secret sauce in it. If you can tap into that stuff in your communications, then you really are onto a win. We had a little diversion into Big Bang Theory. You mentioned that, so I'll move on. Well, it is a great show on telly. Natalie's again a view from the inside. Wants a penny for every time their customers have written personas before they've even spoken to any of their customers. And I think that's something we touched on earlier. That happens quite a lot. And then you mentioned Apple, which seems to come up every time a marketer talks anywhere. Apple comes up, don't they? It's it's de rigueur, I think, and she reflected that.
Yeah, well, they managed to turn Apple into not just a product. Yeah, Apple have managed to turn it not just into a product, but actually into a religion.
Yeah, no, very much, and it was the box opening experience, that customer experience that you were talking about, and I mentioned I've got every box to think of, every piece of Apple tech that I've ever bought. I've still got the box. Natalie,
those boxes are worth money. You know that?
Are they really? Well, in that case, I'm rich beyond my wildest dreams. I would be if I hadn't spent all my money on Apple.
If you weren't keeping all your sweets in there, Tony, they would be.
Yeah, absolutely. Natalie mentioned something about, I'm assuming it's the customer experience as an onboarding strategy, Natalie, and particularly with account-based marketing, which is a specific B2B marketing strategy. Did you want to expand on that? Can you remember it? It's way back.
What did I say? What did I say?
Sorry, we were talking about Apple, the unboxing and all that kind of thing, and you mentioned, and it might have referred before to a point before, in fairness, but you said this is a great onboarding strategy, works particularly well with ABM.
Oh, yes. Oh, so the surprise and delight aspect.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Some things we've tried, in the past is, really small things like, when you onboard a customer, you send them a really cool little book to explain how things work. Or there's a telephone service, I think they're called Moneypenny, and when you sign up to them, they send you a really clever piece of direct mail, and it comes with, I think, a tea bag or a pair of socks or something like that, so you can sit down and have a cup of tea and
socks.
Yeah, it's
I've got a pair of them.
Yeah, it's really well thought out, and it just makes you think, oh, these people, they really care about my business. Using that as part of either an onboard strategy or as part of ABM. So ABM is account-based marketing, where you directly target very specific people. Again, we've used things like, sending little plant seeds or anything that just captures someone's imagination and attention, and lets them just sit and think about you for just a second. They tend to pick up your emails or your calls or whatever it is you're sending them. The propensity to respond goes up. And the other thing that I said was really interesting, maybe not interesting, but the personas should be part of your brand guidelines. I think a lot of businesses have brand guidelines to tell you what colors to paint and where to put the logos, and marketing isn't about painting numbers. Marketing is a really strategic part of how you communicate and understand your business. And so by putting your personas, embedding it as part of your brand guidelines, to me, is fundamental.
Yeah. If anybody wants to have a chat with me about a particular issue they've got, I'm quite happy to expand on this. As I said, I only had a short period of time to talk about this, so I thought, right, let's skip across the top of it. But I'm quite happy to go into much more detail if somebody wants to get in touch with me, connect with me on LinkedIn, arrange a Zoom meeting, and we can have a chat about specific things that you're interested in. I've only literally just scraped a little bit of layer of paint off the top of this subject. It's massive. I've spent the last 20 years doing this stuff. And I find the psychology part of it fascinating. And I think a lot of marketing departments don't have psychologists in them. And they don't have people who understand people. And this is one of the things about data. Data tells you the mechanical steps that people take, but they don't tell you the emotional steps they take. They can't empathize with humans, and humans buy. I've never seen Google actually purchase anything. The Google machines ever purchase anything. I've never seen a robot purchasing something, an algorithm making a purchase. Although I'm sure it's going to happen one day.
Let me advance a theory, Nigel, because it'd be great to hear what you've got to think, what you think about this and some of the other theories. So for me, it's the psychological stuff that you're talking about, the psychology side, be serious, is actually the interface between marketing and sales. Because I think the pure sales function is actually to persuade somebody to take an action, right? And probably an action that they weren't necessarily prepared to do then, or maybe not necessarily prepared to do with you. So, and I think you'll find there's a brilliant book by Dan Pink called To Sell is Human. Dan Pink is very well worth reading for any perspective, but To Sell is Human is very interesting. And in it, he talks about us as politicians, as prospective lovers, as interviewees, as, you know, the multitude of instances where we find ourselves selling in a very basic sense. And that's why I think, you know, people say, what's the difference between sales and marketing? And the obvious answer is, well, sales is kind of a function of marketing, isn't it? But I would say that's the interface. Understanding your customer is an old school sales skill. Ian's just mentioned there as well, the data tells you the what, not the why, which is more or less, I think, in agreement with what you were saying there. You know, data can tell you a lot of things, but the insight, there's a difference between data and insight, isn't there? And Natalie's talked about empathy is so important. You have, you know, great marketers, great salespeople understand. I mean, Sarah is a brilliant example of this. Because in a business which is a salon and hair business, I mean, you want to see the way she interacts with her customers. It's incredible. You talk about data, but it's obviously all locked up here. And the
interesting thing about Sarah's job, and correct me if I'm wrong, Sarah, is when you look at what you're doing, you're actually physically touching your customers.
Yes.
So there's a very personal connection there.
I sign up for that.
And I bet
that sounds great.
Not at the moment, we're not allowed.
I know. But the thing is, in normal times, it's a bit like the phone. Okay, the mobile phone has become very personal to people because they invariably keep it either on their backside or in their breast pocket. So it's right next to their heart. They've got their family, their life is on there. Okay, so you know, when you see some of the mobile companies where you've got people like I can't remember what they're called now. There's one of the large providers in the UK, and they set aside something like £3.5 million a year to pay fines for poor customer service and customer complaints. And you think because it's cheap, they think it's cheaper to do that than it is to actually provide a better service. And the odd thing about all that is that they probably get far more business if they just actually invested in that customer experience journey to improve it.
It might be cheaper just to pay the fines. That sounds like
a
board-driven decision. Yeah. So there's a couple of other things that I want to pull out of that, Nice, just because we get really steaming towards the end here. Chris has put the cat amongst the pigeons, or the fox amongst the hens. Ha ha. Let me see what
Very good, Tony.
Yeah. And it challenges Ian's romantic perspective. That data is this cold and distant force, and it takes the human genius and creativity perhaps to interpret it. Is that just a story we tell ourselves, he says, because two of the most successful businesses in the world exist only in data? Chris, tell us more.
I'm thinking of a third one. I mean, you look at Amazon, Google, Facebook. You try and have any human contact with those businesses. Try and find empathy from Amazon. I mean, Amazon is the anti-empathy, right? People make documentaries about what a terrible company Amazon is and how terrible it is to work in their warehouses. I mean, they have to make advertising to try and convince you it's not true because it's so pervasive. And yet we love them because they've got the data. The data says what we do, and they go for it, and we do it. And I realize not everyone has got the data that Amazon needs, and sorry, the same amount of data that Amazon has. And I wonder if we use these other, what Tony described as more romantic notions to try and compensate for. I don't know if that's the right characterization, but it's a good one.
And interesting
compensate for the fact that we just don't have the data-driven insight that Amazon has. I remember there's a story about Mark Zuckerberg when they made a change to Facebook, and the world was up in arms, and they said, if you don't change this back right now, we're all abandoning the platform. And it looked like Facebook was over. And Zuckerberg just said, I don't care. And they asked him afterwards, why didn't you care? And he said, well, I had the data that said all of those people who were complaining were using the new thing. And the more people we rolled it out to, the more people used it. So we said, we don't care what you think or say you think. We're going for it because we've got the data.
As part of my data protection training, I ask people who has the most data on you, who understands your profile better than anyone else. And those companies, Chris, most of them will consider Amazon or Google. I personally think it's Amazon, but it could just as well be Google. And have all of this data, and they can purpose it for any reason. Has anyone looked at the data protection privacy notices for those organizations and seen how many other organizations they share that data with? And very, very few people have.
No, of course, because everyone says they care about data privacy, but very few people really do.
I think it's changing, but it's a long road to change.
It's a really long road. And what I really like about what Chris has said there, right, is this really, you know, this swings a big flag here for me, because I deal with so many businesses that aren't data driven, so many of them, right? And probably, I mean, I don't even know, this may be completely unfair, but probably most of us on this call aren't data driven in terms of the decisions that we make and the markets we might explore, customers we go to, and so on and so on. So is that romantic perspective that I am a champion of? You know, I put it in Ian's lap there. I agree, insight is more important than data. But is that because we don't have any? It's such a fascinating question, that is. Because you're quite right. Jeff Bezos is sitting there, and he don't care what people think either, does he? You know.
I think data's important. Don't get me wrong, data's important, but it only tells you where they've been. Okay, it doesn't tell you how they feel. And I think that's where, you know, personalization has been a big thing for the last few years. So every time you go and look at something on, well, it's all connected now anyway. So you talk to a friend on the phone about something or other, the next thing you're seeing adverts on your Facebook page for the same thing, and you haven't even looked at it for any of that online. And because they're looking for these keywords which trigger the marketing systems. But I think what's happening is people are starting to reject this now because it's feeling creepy, and we're dealing with emotions within people. And I think you can be personalized to people, but being personalized is as a you know, in a more empathetic way. You talk about Amazon, Google. Yes, they're massive companies, but they have huge departments of user experience and customer experience people working in them. And all they're looking for is the routes to enable them to make more profit. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's what businesses are there for. But we all know that if you go to Amazon, there's no connecting with someone. There's no having a chat while they're doing some in the spa as they're doing some work, because can Amazon provide that service? No, it can't, unless it starts employing lots of people. But they have such a vast amount of data being brought in all the time. They can look at it all and say something and learn something. But do they share that with you and me?
I have
no, they don't.
I have the fear that what this is only going to do, it's going to create a bigger divide between those large, huge organizations that can implement machine learning and AI to get these insights out, and smaller organizations that can't or won't be able to do that. And I think
that's happening. I think that you've just painted a picture of the next 20 years. But companies who aren't data driven, just as companies who weren't online, and just as companies who didn't respond, it's got to happen. Here's a question for you. You mentioned AI and automation there. We're talking about data, and we're talking about that interface, right? Which really is a human interface, isn't it? So I get the data, and we've all said I make some kind of conclusion, I take some sort of insight, I make some sort of decision based on what my data shows me. So there's a kind of perspective here that data is, you know, inviolate. It is what it is. It's black and white. It's right or wrong, up or down. That's not the case, is it? And different people have different perspectives.
And who wrote the algorithm?
Exactly. So
software developers that can actually influence the world more as time goes on.
So my question would be, you know, even in a data-driven company like Amazon is a brilliant example. You know, at what point does that become a human-driven company again? You know, because I don't think we're advanced enough. I think AI is coming, but we're not advanced enough to create
a long way off.
Exactly, that can make decisions in the same way a human brain can. So at some point, There is a person taking that data and doing something with it. So at some point, it's not data driven by definition.
At some point, someone's got to come along and interpret the data to help the business. And this is something I pointed out to a couple of clients is, yeah, great, big data. If you want to spend a lot of money on big data, what you've got to realize is that your small website and your 10 clients a month are not, and your 100 visitors a month are not going to generate enough data for you to make any informed decisions. You're better off going to talk to those 100 people, invite them to a party or something or other, or a conference, and just have discussions with them. I see that Natalie's put up a thing there about age differences. Yeah, there are age differences on personas. Again, it's about who you're targeting as a market, as a customer. And oddly enough, there's a generation coming through now, the 14 and 15-year-olds, who are starting to reject technology.
Yeah, agreed.
I know it sounds surprising.
No, it's not.
They're scared, okay, because suddenly they realize that everything they do, they're being watched. And they don't realize that what's watching them is that phone in their pocket, okay? And what, when you talk to them and ask them about, because I give talks into schools up until February. The last one I did was in February, but I was talking to 15-year-olds. I was talking to them about the use of technology and the use of the internet, and half of them are pretty switched on to the fact that if they talk to someone on the phone, then they'll see the advert for it a few days later. If they do something in one place, and they realize they're being manipulated. Okay.
No, my 15-year-old will give similar perspective that it's quite sad, but they are very adept at spotting inappropriate communication, for instance. They're very adept at, I won't tell you what they call people who try to crash into their parties and start to talk to them. But at the same time, he can barely switch his computer on, and I'm helping him navigate through Teams because I'm not interested. Tools like YouTube, Xbox, for sure. But in terms of my grasp or our grasp, perhaps as a group here of technology, he's just nowhere near. He's not interested. Absolutely not interested. And not overtly. Natalie, why is your 17-year-old ditched the phone? Is that a style?
Well done.
Is that what's that driven by? Is that fear?
Yeah, I think it is just a couple of things. One is this whole idea of being watched and everything's being recorded, but also the idea of, she would explain it differently. To me, it's the lack of role models and how the social space has created these fake role models that they're growing up with, and she's fortunately enough worked out that it's just a load of BS. She's not interested in that anymore. So yeah, I think you're right. My question earlier was around, so all of us probably agree about the whole idea of Amazon and Chris Fox, what you said about, they've got all this data. And I think all of us here are probably a similar age group. We probably all agree, and I'm not being ageist by saying this, but I think we probably all agree that, data helps us and can drive those decisions. I wonder and maybe worry about, the 20-year-olds going into business. How are they making decisions? Because they're so reliant on data, and they haven't got that commercial kind of acumen that they've developed over a time period to look at data and interpret it. What's going to happen if things don't change? When they get to 35, 40 and they start going up the exec ladder, how are they going to have those skills to make decisions? I think that's a very complex and debatable topic.
Yeah, fascinating. Yeah. Cheers, Chris.
Yes, thanks
thank you for joining us.
Really enjoying it, but got to go. Sorry. Catch you next time.
No problem. Thanks for coming along and listening in and your contribution as well, Chris.
Yeah, thanks, Nigel. Cheers.
So that's probably a nice place to break, because we are as great as it is. We probably need a bit of wine for this conversation to continue as productively as it is. And even though we're in lockdown, it's still a bit early for that.
Well, thank you everybody for listening to my witterings, and hopefully it's stimulated. Well, I can see it stimulated conversation,
correct,
and made you think about the whole thing. And as I said, if anybody wants to get in touch with me, join me on LinkedIn. and let's do a Zoom meeting, and I'll talk to you directly about the stuff you're doing. Okay, thank you very much indeed.
Nigel.
Thank you,
Thanks, Nigel.
Tony, for
Thanks very
sorting
much.
it.
Great.
My
Bye.
pleasure.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
Tony.